Euaoi. 2023 was a unique year that had some winners and some losers. One area that took a massive L this year was none other than Hollywood. From a 4-month-long writer's strike and a 3-month-long actor's strike to a massive string of box office bombs and mass layoffs. It's not an exaggeration to say that Hollywood really took a beating this year. While this all seems like bad news, it wasn't all doom and gloom for Hollywood this year. The Super Mario Bros. Movie became the first film based on a video game, the 11th animated film, and the 52nd film overall to gross $1 billion worldwide. It became Illumination's highest-grossing film, surpassing Minions, and set the record for Illumination's biggest opening, surpassing Minions: The Rise of Gru. It surpassed 2019's Frozen 2 as having the highest-grossing opening worldwide for an animated film, grossing $375.6 million. The film achieved the second highest grossing opening weekend in the US and Canada for an animated film. It became the highest grossing video game film of all time, surpassing Warcraft in just 9 days. It was even the highest grossing Hollywood animated film in Japan and was even the highest grossing film of all time in some countries like Mexico. Barbie became the 53rd overall film to gross $1 billion worldwide. It became the highest grossing comedy film, surpassing Minions. It surpassed Jia Ling's Hi Mom to become the highest grossing movie with a solo female director. It had the largest domestic opening weekend for a film that is not a sequel, remake, or superhero property, totaling $162 million. It also achieved the largest opening weekend for a female-directed film, surpassing the record set by Captain Marvel in 2019. It became the fastest Warner Bros. Film to reach the $1 billion mark, doing so within 17 days of release. It surpassed the previous 19-day record held by Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 back in 2011. Its second-week domestic earnings of $92 million was the largest sophomore weekend ever for a Warner Bros. Film, and the 7th largest ever. It became the highest-grossing Warner Bros. Film in the United States and Canada, surpassing The Dark Knight from 2008. It became Warner Bros.' highest-grossing film ever, beating out Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Oppenheimer became the highest-grossing World War II film of all time, surpassing 2017's Dunkirk, also directed by Christopher Nolan. It became the highest-grossing biographical film of all time, surpassing Bohemian Rhapsody from 2018. It is the second highest-grossing R-rated film of all time behind 2019's Joker, and is the highest-grossing opening weekend for an R-rated film since the COVID-19 pandemic. It is the fourth highest-grossing IMAX release of all time, accumulating $184 million, 20% of the film's total worldwide gross, through IMAX theaters alone, including $17 million from 30 IMAX 70mm film screens around the world. It became Nolan's highest-grossing film in over 50 overseas markets, including Germany, India, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, and the United Kingdom. Unfortunately, Mario, Barbie, and Oppenheimer were just shimmering beams of light in a vast field of darkness for Tinseltown. From May 2nd to September 27th, 2023, 11,500 screenwriters who were part of the Writers Guild of America went on strike over a labor dispute with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. The strike lasted 148 days and is tied with the 1960 strike as the second longest labor stoppage that the WGA has performed, only behind the 1988 strike, which clocked in at 153 days. It wasn't just the writers that went on strike. The 2023 Screen Actors Guild / American Federation of Television and Radio Artists strike, which lasted from July 14th to November 9th, 2023, went on strike over a labor dispute with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers as the longest strike in SAG-AFTRA history, totaling 118 days. It was part of a series of broader Hollywood labor disputes. Both strikes contributed to the biggest interruption to the American film and television industries since the COVID-19 pandemic. The WGA went on strike due to a lack of agreement on a new contract between the WGA and the AMPTP, and poor compensation for writers via residuals with the advent of streaming media. The goal behind the WGA strike was to increase funding and job security for writers, increase the size of writers' rooms, and limit the use of artificial intelligence in the writing process. The WGA membership officially ratified the deal on October 9th, with 99% of WGA members voting in favor of the new contract. SAG-AFTRA went on strike due to a lack of agreement on a new contract between SAG-AFTRA and the AMPTP. Disagreement over streaming residuals, regulation of self-tape auditions, and a studio usage of artificial intelligence to scan actors' faces to generate performances digitally. The goal for SAG-AFTRA was ratifying a labor contract, a streaming service residual formula, greater regulation of self-tape auditions, and preventing AI from replacing actors on set. Voting for a deal concluded on December 5th. The deal was approved with 78.33% support, with a 38.15% turnout. The effects of the strikes led to many award shows and festivals being either cancelled or postponed. On top of that, many movies and TV shows had their productions delayed. Some television networks like CBS extended the time slots of their non-scripted shows like Survivor and The Amazing Race from 60 minutes to 90 minutes, just to fill in the void that was left by the strikes. Industry workers lost roughly $1.4 billion in wages between April and September 2023, or roughly 0.5% of the industry's annual economic activity. During the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes, which ended in late September and late last month respectively, the California economy overall took a $6.5 billion hit. Nationally, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, over 45,000 jobs were lost from when the 12,000-strong Scribes Guild hit the picket lines in early May, followed by the 160,000-strong Actors Guild in mid-July to mid-October. And speaking of lost jobs, that leads me to the next problem Hollywood suffered. As previously mentioned, over 45,000 jobs were slashed from Hollywood, with many entertainment companies like Amazon, CBS, DreamWorks Animation, NBC Universal, Netflix, Roku, Starz, and Warner Bros. Discovery all downsizing their staffs within the second half of 2023. As for how many or how fast those jobs will be recovered, Patrick Adler, a principal at Westwood Economics and Planning Associates and assistant professor at the University of Hong Kong, had this to say about the aftermath of the strikes. The end of the strikes means there's a possibility of reversing the steady and steep employment declines of the last year, Dr. Adler told Deadline today. But it's an open question if all of the lost jobs over the past year are coming back, he added. We show that the industry's business model is at a serious inflection point. Fundamental questions about how much content will be produced and how it will be paid for are less resolved now than they were ahead of the last SAG-AFTRA deal. The academic went on to say the industry's employment level hangs in the balance. We should resist the urge to see ratification as an end to some great reckoning. From Disney's Bob Iger on down, executives over the past year have stressed a shift to less shows and projects in a cost-saving and stock-bumping moves cloaked as quality over quantity. Almost all of Hollywood production is controlled by publicly traded companies, and Wall Street has exerted more pressure on the industry since interest rates spiked in 2022. Dr. Adler notes, basically $1 of production money is much more expensive today than it was in 2021, and so the street expects higher return. What this means is that future strikes and standstills could potentially happen, and whether those jobs will be added back or not will depend on how much content Hollywood makes. And if Hollywood chooses to downscale in production, that means the less likely it is for those 45,000 lost jobs to be filled again. One thing that's not going to help Hollywood get its jobs back are all the box office bombs that happened this year, with summer 2023 in particular being a box office bloodbath, as most movies that ended up releasing during that time either underperformed or straight up bombed. One problem behind these bombs is franchise fatigue, since moviegoers are now starting to grow tired of superhero movies, especially from Disney and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Since Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, and The Marvels both became some of the lowest grossing movies in Marvel Cinematic history. On top of that, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny became a massive flop from Disney, showing franchise fatigue beyond the MCU. The live-action remake of The Little Mermaid and Elemental both underperformed as well. It wasn't just Disney that had produced bombs. Universal had Fast X, Renfield, The Book Club: The Next Chapter, and The Last Voyage of Demeter. Paramount had Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1 and Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. Sony had Dumb Money and 65, and Warner Brothers had The Flash, Blue Beetle, Shazam: Fury of the Gods, and Aquaman and the Lost City. In case you didn't notice a pattern, a good chunk of those bombs came from popular cinematic franchises. Whether it would be the superhero movies from Disney and Warner Brothers, Universal with Fast and Furious, or Paramount with Mission Impossible. These numbers show that consumers are starting to get tired of Hollywood milking these once beloved media franchises. Sure, there were some exceptions to this rule, like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 from Disney, Scream 4 and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem from Paramount, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse from Sony, and Hunger Games: The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes from Lionsgate. But the flops show that these kinds of movies are no longer a safe bet like they once were. From the strikes and box office bombs that led to mass layoffs across Tinseltown, it's clear that Hollywood has found itself in a pretty deep hole. As for the film studios themselves, Disney seems to be learning their lesson somewhat by announcing they will be cutting back on Marvel and Star Wars related content. While they'll be cutting back on superhero movies and Star Wars, they're not cutting back on sequels and live-action remakes since Disney announced Inside Out 2 and Toy Story 5 from Pixar, and even has more live-action remakes in development, such as the live-action remakes of Snow White, Moana, and Lilo and Stitch. They're even making a prequel to the live-action Lion King titled Mufasa: The Lion King. Warner Brothers seems to be getting a little too trigger-happy with Barbie's success, as it was announced that there's going to be a Mattel Cinematic Universe, with 14 movies already announced and another 45 currently in the works. Some of the announced movie titles include movies starring American Girl, Polly Pocket, Hot Wheels, and He-Man, with some others making no sense like Uno, Rock'em Sock'em Robots, and a Magic 8-Ball movie. As for how well the Mattel Cinematic Universe turns out, only time will tell. Sony is also making a live-action movie based on The Legend of Zelda, following the success of the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Will video game movies become the new superhero movies? Only time will tell. So, what do you think? Do you think Hollywood can return to its former glory after an awful 2023? Do you think these film studios are learning from their mistakes? Will there be more Hollywood strikes in the future? Feel free to leave your takes in the comments below, and have a happy new year.